Alright everyone, how's it going? So let's get started with what is the difference between Linux kernel and an operating system in general. So any operating system, if you take whether it could be Windows or Mac OS or Linux, any distribution of Linux, it really doesn't matter. Every operating system will have a kernel as a core part of it. So what is kernel and what functionalities does the kernel gives by default? On top of that, what is the operating system which is adding to that kernel? That is something which you're going to take a deep dive into this session. Let's get started. This is the official repository of Linux kernel. In Linux kernel, we have different set of files and folders which is present over here, right? So we have an architecture folder, like we have different architectures, like x86 and ARM architecture, and we have different of plenty of architectures, right? So all these architecture related files will be present over here. And with respect to drivers, by default, Linux kernel provides driver supports to Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi drivers and other bunch of generic drivers, right? All these drivers files is present over here, and Linux also offers supports to different varieties of file systems. So some of the file systems is in fact mentioned over here. And we have the all the libraries, and with respect to network, I'm talking about the basic networking, like the CEF and the Ethernet related content, and all the other related all the other basic internet related stuffs, right, which is present over here. And on top of that, virtualization with respect to KVM. KVM is also a part of Linux kernel itself. Just take a look into this. Linux kernel by default offers a good chunk of a solid foundation. So these are the core functionalities, and the functionalities which offered by the Linux kernel out of the box. Then how this kernel is different from an operating system? So apart from this, we need different set of functionalities or tools in order to have a full-fledged Linux machine. So now let us take a deeper dive into what operating system offers for us. So let us take this one as a Linux core, that is the kernel. As we saw, like this kernel offers different varieties of functionalities, like driver support and basic networking support, and the bunch of other different functionalities out of the box from kernel itself. And we have another layer called an operating system layer. So operating system basically manages the packages. Like if you're already using any one of the Linux distributions, you may come across apt for Ubuntu and for yum or DNF for Red Hat based distributions. And it also offers other functionalities with respect to networking. This is the basic level of networking, where it has all the necessary libraries. This is with respect to network configuration, like how to configure the network. For example, Ubuntu uses something called as NetPlan, and the other operating systems will be using different configuration managers. And we have different options with respect to firewall. Like Ubuntu uses user firewall, and other users Red Hat based users firewall D, but in general all these firewall will talk to something called as IP tables. IP tables is the actual firewall, and using these sort of packages, we are managing this IP tables in an easy fashion. And we have different user interfaces, like GNOME is one of the user interface, and Cinnamon is one of the user interface, and KDE is one of the user interface, and we have different varieties like Budgie. These are rarely used. So there are different varieties of user interfaces also. So what these what these operating systems will do is they need a package manager, and they need a network configuration manager, and they need a firewall managers, right? So in terms of Ubuntu, they either develop their own way of configuration, or they pick and choose whichever is feasible for their operating system. In terms of Ubuntu uses the apt, as I told before, and in terms of, and with respect to app, and in along with apt, it also uses something called as Snap. They are trying to develop an unified package manager, that is, Snap will work on Ubuntu and it will also work on other distributions also. This is similar to Flatpak. And also with respect to service managers, right? We have different varieties of service managers, in primarily three varieties of service managers, right? One is system D, and another one is upstart, and another one is system sys 5 init. So these are different varieties of system service managers available in Linux. So most of the operating systems like Ubuntu, Red Hat were now switched to system D, but there are, the reason why I'm saying this is there are different varieties of options for managing the services. And in terms of interface, Ubuntu is somewhat friendly enough. So in short, we have a kernel that is a core part of the operating system. On top of that kernel, we have an operating system layer, which in fact packages or adds certain functionalities on top of the kernel. And companies like Canonical, packages this as a whole, and they distribute this Linux flavor. That is why it is called as distribution or distro. So why this concept is important now is, we want to understand this before even we are going to containerization, because containers is the one which is going to share the host machine's kernel inside the containers, because container image won't have the kernel inside it. It is just going to have this particular block, probably. It will not have this block, because this is going to share from the host machine itself. So before wrapping the session, a quick question to you guys. Is it possible to install a Linux kernel alone in a machine without having any sort of operating system packages? Is it possible? Will it work? So technically it is possible, but practically it is useless. Why? Because for a machine to run, it needs a process, right? And an init process, that is something which is not present in a kernel out of the box, that offered by an operating system only. Even though it's possible, it is useless. So if you want to get started with the kernel alone, like to build your own operating system, then the best way is to go with the Linux from the scratch. This is one of the best starting point if you want to create your own operating system with just a plain Linux kernel, and get started with this. You can download the Linux kernel from this website itself. This GitHub itself, where you have different varieties of kernel versions available. Pick and choose any one of these which which is meeting your requirement, and get started with the Linux from the scratch website. Good luck with this.